So this was the question time from Thursday. It was the most recent question time since Boris Johnson's resignation. So it should be interesting to see what the actual discussion was on question time. It's only from the 7th, so it's only 2 days old. So it should still be pretty fresh discourse. Obviously, it was before all of the people announced their candidacy, but we're going to cover that later. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get on with it.
Well, Boris Johnson is going after what feels like a year's worth of events squeezed into 24 hours. What happens next? We're going to try and make sense of it all with our audience here in South Yorkshire. Welcome to Question Time from Barnsley. On tonight's panel, one of the new MPs elected in 2019, the first ever Conservative MP for the seat of Bishop Auckland in County Durham, and an early critic to declare no confidence in the Prime Minister, Deanna Davison. Labour's Shadow Education Secretary and a key part of Keir Starmer's team since he was elected leader, Bridget Phillipson. The Daily Telegraph columnist, leader writer and author, Tim Stanley. One of the new architects of New Labour, who was the chief spin doctor for Tony Blair, went back into number 10 Downing Street with Gordon Brown in the final days of the last Labour government, and is now a podcaster, among other things, Alistair Campbell, and a musician who was in the award-winning band Mumford & Sons, who headlined Glastonbury in 2013. He left the band after a political row and is the second podcaster on our panel, Winston Marshall.
The cancelled celebrity to podcaster grift is still going strong, still the excellent career path.
Good evening. Welcome to Barnsley. Welcome to our panel. Great to see you. Welcome to our audience here. Good to see you as well. And of course, welcome to you joining us, watching at home. Very good to have you with us. Do join in the conversation the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. We'll hear what you've got to say. So I don't think there'll be much surprise about our first topic this evening, but there are lots of other questions, important questions that you've answered, which I also want to get to later in the programme, so stay with us. Let's hear our first question now, which is from Adam. Adam Tees.
So, with no real functioning government currently, what is going to happen next?
Well, that is the question. What is going to happen next? Deanna.
That is a big question and very much the question that's on all of our minds, I think, Adam, because unfortunately what has happened over the past 6 to 8 months has been distraction. It's been a government that's been focused on, unfortunately, on Boris Johnson, on events that have emerged out of Downing Street, on the kind of antics that have followed. And in my view, what we absolutely need now is focus on the issues that matter. Focus on the issues that matter to each one of us in this room. We're facing a cost of living crisis. We need to be talking about that. There's a war going on in Ukraine. We absolutely need to be talking about that. And unfortunately, focus of government has been lost. So in my view, what happens next, and I'm hoping it happens speedily, is that the Conservative Party elect a new leader who will become Prime Minister, and they will get on with the job.
And you...
Yeah, how are they going to get on with the job? What on earth can a Conservative Prime Minister do? More than what Boris Johnson's done for the cost of living crisis. Like, it's an absolute miracle that Boris Johnson was so fucking under the cosh because of Partygate and because of the Sue Gray report that he felt like he needed to do the income support payments to get people through the cost of living crisis, right? I mean, I guess they could do a tax cut on working class people, but then again, people could say, oh no, we're going to cause more inflation or whatever. But I mean, that's the only real thing that you could do, unless you want to spend even more money, which I would be fine with, the Exchequer paying out more money and to people, or more people engaging in some kind of activism to, kind of collective bargaining to be able to increase their wages. But then again, you still get the same kind of right old things about inflation, even though we're not even in a wage price spiral. We're in a price spiral currently. So what would a Tory Prime Minister do more than what Boris Johnson's done? Like, it feels like they're unless you give us a concrete plan about what people should or shouldn't do, it's just empty words.
You were a supporter of Boris Johnson at the beginning.
I didn't vote for him in the leadership contest, actually.
Are you surprised by how things have turned out?
I wouldn't say entirely surprised. I was hopeful. When the Prime Minister won the leadership contest, and he won it very decisively, I believe in democracy. I got behind him, that's what you do. It's the right thing to do. And he ran an absolutely excellent election campaign. He talked a big game on Brexit. We got a Brexit deal through. Of course, there are
a Brexit deal that wasn't even complete. A Brexit deal with the Northern Ireland Protocol that he explicitly lied about. I'm going to keep saying this because it's really fucking important. It was a lie that won him the election, the oven-ready Brexit deal, when he explicitly told Ian Paisley Jr. in the DUP they had no intention of applying the Northern Ireland Protocol, and it was literally only in the manifesto and in the original Brexit deal so that they could try and win the election off the back of that lie, and they always planned to get rid of it. So they didn't even win, he didn't even get Brexit done.
Bits to work out now, but actually I think the Prime Minister initially, you can laugh, Alistair, we know you're not a fan of Brexit, initially started out well, but unfortunately it started unravelling, and it started unravelling because of a lack of integrity and because of lies that were coming out of Downing Street.
So Boris Johnson is a liar, that's what you're saying?
I think there have been mistruths that have been told, and I think they've continued to be mistold, and whenever they've been caught out, a new lie has been found.
Alistair.
I mean, anybody who's ever known Boris Johnson, I've known him for over 30 years, anybody who's ever worked with him knows that he's a liar. Every single person who worked with him knew that he was a liar.
Like, it's frustrating to have Alistair Campbell on this episode because he's 100% correct in his judgment on Boris Johnson, but he's literally the last person you would ever want to accuse anybody of lying. Weapons of mass destruction? Hello? Right, I'm sorry, like, lying about Partygate or lying about, even lying about Chris Pincher. That's not quite as much as lying about the illegal war that you took the country into.
Liar. Every single person who sat around that cabinet table and propped him up knew he was a liar. Every single right-wing commentator who licked his backside and told us he was going to be a wonderful man, they all
Not just right-wing commentators, though, was it?
knew he was a liar. And the thing is, you say what should happen next. The first thing should happen, he should be got out of Downing Street. John Major is absolutely right. He will do more havoc if he's there as a caretaker. He's corrupt. He's entitled. He's a liar. He's delivered nothing. He's the worst Prime Minister this country has ever had. And the sooner he's out of that place, the better.
Again, 100% correct, but you're just literally in no position to point any fingers, Alistair.
The man in the blue shirt.
So, always competent enough then to get us out of this absolute toxic crisis that we're in that's affecting the nation.
All right, so who should the next leader be? Well, listen, park that for a minute. We're going to answer this original question and we will come back to that. Tim, with no real functioning government, that's a crucial part of Adam's question. What happens next?
Things can only get better. I think a
It's
spell
all a joke to these guys. It's all a joke to them.
Is that the poshest cunt I've ever heard? Hey, well, things can only get better. Look at my little coiffed hair. I look like I've just come straight out of Eton.
These guys.
Oh, here we go.
Things can only get better.
Here we go.
They are part of the problem. The British media are part of the problem. They delivered him. They sucked up to him. Johnson has described the Telegraph as his real boss, and they are part of the problem. The next thing that should happen, our political culture and our media culture have to change, otherwise it will happen again.
Like, no word of a lie, I guess, with regards to the media. But then again, the media were the people who kind of propped up to the point at which New Labour happened. All of the kind of shit that he wanted, his position within the kind of political hierarchy of being someone who apparently has had all of his sins regarding the Iraq War absolved by the media just because he was explicitly anti-Corbyn, explicitly, one of the kind of pro-business types within kind of the New Labour cadre of kind of political actors, right? How dare he come and say, oh, well, it's the media's fault that Boris Johnson's in that position. It was the media's fault that you managed to get into the position that you're in to be able to smear the only person who has any real solutions to the economic problems facing this country and facing the working class. Like, I'm sorry, Alistair. Like, it's frustrating because, again, he's entirely correct, but he's just too far lost in the source and he's got too much against his own name. He's in no position to make any accusations against anybody else.
You lied this country into a war that cost thousands of lives. Boris Johnson ate some cake. I really don't think...
Alistair, you've got to let him answer, and then No, Alistair,
Okay,
I'm in
fine.
charge here, and then I will
Okay.
let him come back to you.
OK, well, he better be careful what he says, because the last guy regretted it.
Alistair,
Carry on.
Alistair, you have to let other people speak
will.
on the panel. Tim.
Thank you. I don't think Boris Johnson was particularly more corrupt or untruthful than any politician who's come before. I don't think his time was any particular more ridden with scandal. I think the problem was the way he handled it, the complete chaotic nature of his personality and his organisation, and what that climaxed in, which is what really brought him down. Was initially lying about the Chris Pincher affair and then crucially sending ministers out to repeat that falsehood. And ultimately in our system, you can't govern unless you command a majority, and that majority disappeared. Now, of course, from his point of view, what he would say, and I'm not saying this because I wish to clean his record or even necessarily defend him, but because someone on this programme has got to explain why he did what he did in the last 48 hours.
Do you think he should have stayed, Tim?
No, as I said, I'm not saying he should have done. What I'm saying is someone's got to explain why he's done what he's done. His view was that parliamentary majority you spoke about was his, not the Tory party's. He was elected to do something to deliver Brexit. He felt he was trying to do it, and he thought he was up against a party which had never accepted him. And constitutionally, he had a right to see if he could try to form a government. Ultimately, he failed, and that's when he decided to go. What I thought was very interesting about his resignation speech, when Theresa May resigned, I found it quite an emotional moment. She famously said, "I did my best," and you really felt like she had. In his case,
Yeah, she did her best at deporting black people, letting tower blocks burn down, and selling weapons to Saudi Arabia.
it wasn't a resignation speech. It was a surrender. He was saying, I didn't want to go. I don't believe I've done wrong, but you people have forced me out. It's a very different kind of leadership, presidential rather than parliamentary. But I don't think we'll ever see a man of his charisma in that office ever again.
Jeez.
Okay.
It doesn't have what charisma did Boris Johnson have? He was a bumbling fool. Talk about fucking whiff-waff. All that shit. Like, just because he's a bumbling idiot, a fucking buffoon, that doesn't constitute any kind of level of political acumen or actual charisma. And no one was ever aroused by a Boris Johnson speech.
There are lots of hands up, so let's hear from as many people as I can get that. The one minister I could teach it.
First of all, how can you trivialise what he did wrong by saying that he just ate a piece of cake? That's not what he did. People couldn't bury their family. People couldn't be there when their families were dying because he was eating cake and drinking wine.
Because it's a game.
So, but also, do you not think that this now needs to trigger a general election? Do we not need to decide that who's in power?
In the blue striped top, yes.
I just want to say as well what you said about all he did was eat cake. Like, that's not true for many people who I know who watched friends and family in hospital and weren't allowed to say goodbye to them. A very close friend of mine, her grandma died in hospital and she wasn't allowed to go and visit her. How can you trivialise that and say that all he did was eat cake? He completely wrecked the reputation of the Tory party in my eyes because it was one rule for them and another for everyone else. So I just think that that's completely not what it's about.
Can I ask if you're asking that as a Conservative or a Labour voter?
Myself, a Labour vote.
Right, OK. The man at the back, yes, with the white shirt, short-sleeve white shirt.
Yes, going back onto your point around the understanding of Boris Johnson being charismatic, there's always been a trend line of charismatic leaders always leading a government into disarray. Their charisma will always allow a lot of people to be disillusioned with what's actually going on, what's actually affecting people. And I think that's what's happened with Boris Johnson. He has sought to stroke his own ego. He's been shameless in what he's done. And it has led the country into ill repute globally. And now we're in this mess.
OK, and the man there in the glasses with the beard.
Thank you. Yeah, my opinion of Boris Johnson hasn't really changed. I see him as being despicable, toxic, manipulative, a liar, and having the morals of a polecat. My fear is that we are now having a leadership election amongst the Tories. I think we will end up with a different jockey riding the same old dead horse. And I also believe they won't have the courage to go to the country in the near future.
OK, well, I'm going to get to that point. I know there are Conservative voters in this audience.
They're actually right. Obviously, this guy saying all he did was eat some cake. Did he just eat some cake? Like, if anything, the like the Partygate is the least of our worries. It was the crony contracts. It was the fucking Chris Pitcher scandal. The guy protected a serial sexual abuser. The guy, like, the Greensill Capital scandal, him and Rishi Sunak were, like, having WhatsApp chats with previous prime ministers to use government money, like public money, to bail out the failing businesses that they were lobbying for. In what way? In what possible universe was this just about cake? As I said, Partygate, I think we spent far too much time thinking about Partygate and not any time properly expanding on the real issues with the corruption and the sleaze and the treachery of the kind of rotten at the heart of the Conservative Party. Obviously, Partygate is really easy to turn into a Boris Johnson issue rather than a Conservative Party issue. And that's why the media obviously go with that line. Because honestly, the thing that's kind of the most visceral as well. But, like, I'm sorry, this guy protected and promoted a serial sexual predator. That is irredeemable. And the fact that the rest of the Conservative Party knew about him and they still didn't bring it up, whilst he was a sitting MP representing his constituents in Parliament, utterly fucking disgraceful. And they're all fucking to blame because everybody knew. It was clearly understood amongst Tory members, amongst the Tory MPs, the members in Parliament, right? They all knew that he was dodgy. They all knew that he had a reputation. Why was it never brought up before a big scandal broke, right? Why does it have to be a big scandal where suddenly it gets leaked to the press rather than everyone being upfront about it the moment that it happens, when everybody fucking knows? Because you know why? It's because they're too busy trying to protect their own arses. They don't give a shit about having somebody with that horrendous reputation as Pincher in Parliament. They don't give a shit about that. Like, they don't give a shit what the theoretical reputation to their party would be should people actually end up knowing about him. Because if people did end up knowing, then suddenly their seats and their careers might be in jeopardy. It's so fucking, completely self-centered. And how they can ever claim to act in the public interest again, with how they've kept this under the rug, it's indefensible, completely indefensible. Well, it should have been the rats fleeing the sinking rats, because they're all fucking rats, they're all vermin. All the fucking Tory party, they're all fucking little vermin scuttling around using our money to be able to heat their pools and heat their stables and pay their mistresses and throw money into their family members' businesses, like pretending to know how to make PPE. They're all fucking scum. They're all completely getting brown envelopes full of cash stuffed into their pockets by donors. I hate all of them. They have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. I didn't listen to any questions, no Scribby, but that definitely sounds like something fun to watch.
Do any of you feel, I'm not suggesting you should, but do any of you feel you want to speak up for Boris Johnson?
Yeah, I agree with that one, man.
Right, let's hear from you.
Is that any different than sitting and having a Chinese takeaway or a takeaway? Which is what Starmer did.
Well,
and sat there and had drinks, but then denied it. It doesn't matter whether he's or whether he isn't. He sat there.
Anyone who thinks, like, you know me, anyone who's watched this channel for more than 5 minutes knows I fucking despise Keir Starmer. I think that man's an absolute fucking charlatan as well, right? Absolute, complete charlatan. But Beergate is nonsense politics, right? The only reason why it's ever became a thing again, right? Because it was reported when it happened ages ago, and people looked over it. The only reason why it was ever brought up again, as James O'Brien, I actually agree with James O'Brien on something. He brought up how the only reason why is because they couldn't defend Boris Johnson, so they had to equivocate. They had to say, all of those politicians are bad, they all did this. Here's Keir Starmer doing something that we're going to deem to be similar so that we can demonise both sides equally to try and save Boris Johnson, or at least the extremely right-wing pro-Boris press did. And it's not equivocal at all, and quite rightly they didn't. They were judged by Durham police to have not done anything wrong, which is the correct result, right? I mean, I'm sad. I wish they had been fined. I wish Keir Starmer did have to step down. That would not only be peak memes, but would allow us to have someone a proper Labour politician to be leader. But that wasn't going to happen because he didn't break any fucking rules. It clearly was within the rules for him to be able to do that. And it is an incredibly snide that the press did what they did around Beergate to try and equivocate when there was no equivocation there. Because even then, even outside of Partygate, like, he may be a liar about his pledges, but how many sexual abuses has Keir Starmer covered up for? Like, it really is chalk and cheese. Like, I dislike obviously both these politicians, but if you want to try and find out who was worse, the Tories are absolutely worse.
And then he denied it, and his sidekick even forgot she were there.
Well,
of course,
the
police have not come to their decision yet, as far as Durham is concerned.
Hasn't he put?
Well, tell you what. Yes, okay, I'll answer it very quickly. Actually, no, Bridget, you should answer that.
Yeah. I'm confident Keir Starmer broke no rules, and that will be the conclusion. But we do know, beyond doubt, that Boris Johnson broke the law, repeatedly lied to the British people. They were wheeling in suitcases full of booze, while people were making the most extraordinary sacrifices. But this is about more than just one man and one man's actions. This is about the Conservative Party. The last 12 years, not just the last 12 months.
Finally, a Labour politician actually saying that it's a Tory party issue and not trying to pin it specifically on Boris Johnson.
Position now where you can't get a GP appointment, where you wait months on end in pain to get seen at the hospital, where our children who went through the most terrible experience during the pandemic still don't have the support that they need in order to catch up on all of that lost learning and development time. And to go back to the original question, no, we don't have a functioning government, and we don't have a government focused on the issues that are really important right now: the cost of living, the cost of childcare, the fact that when people do the weekly shop they have to put things back, that we're a country now in modern Britain where people at food banks turn down food that they have to cook because they don't have the means to cook it.
And
I
the
think
other
that
half
should
of the
be a
question,
source of shame for us all. And that comes down to the last 12 years, not just Boris Johnson, a Conservative Party that enabled and facilitated this man, rotten from top to bottom.
The other half of the question, Bridget, is what should happen next. One of the people in the audience here mentioned a general election, and Keir Starmer has said that's what he thinks should happen.
I'd relish the opportunity to set out the difference that a Labour government would make to this country.
Talk us through this suggestion of upholding a vote of no confidence. What is the significance of that, and when are you going to do it?
So it falls to the Conservative Party, first and foremost, to get Boris Johnson out of Downing Street now. He should have already gone. He should not still be squatting in Downing Street. If he doesn't go, we'll force a vote of no confidence and he'll be out.
Obviously, if the Conservatives don't back that, you won't win that vote of confidence. So it might end up an empty gesture.
Well, again, it's on them. It's on them. They have a choice to make. And this is not just about him. This is about every Conservative MP, every member of that cabinet who still, despite everything that they know about him, about the fact that he enabled a sexual predator to be at the heart of government, they went out and defended that. I find it sickening that we allow someone like that to be at the heart of government.
Okay. Winston.
No notes whatsoever. 100% correct.
Adam's original question is, with no real functioning government currently, and we've still got something like 30 ministerial posts unfilled, what happens next?
I'd like to pick up on Bridget's point there, that turns out there are more sex pests in the Tory party than there are in the music business, which really is saying something. I'd also like to pick up on the two things these two ladies said about the cake. This is a Prime Minister, the only ever sitting Prime Minister to have a criminal charge. And we've talked about how he's a liar and all these other things, but what about his incompetence? this guy, inflation is now 9.1%, projected to get to 11%. Pretty much the entire public sector are striking or are preparing to strike. There's labour shortages in agriculture and in air travel as well as other industries. And this is the government, and I haven't even talked about the NHS and all that, but this is the government that purports to be the safe hands for the economy, right? This is total incompetency, and that alone is reason that he should have gone a long time ago.
Okay.
I mean, what Tory would do better? Like, there's no way back. There's no way back for any kind of conservative policy to get this country moving again economically. They've got nothing. They've got nothing, and they'll do nothing. What they'll just cut, their plan for just cutting business rates, cutting corporation tax. Well, I'm sure even more money filtering up to the top 1%. That's really going to help the economy, although I guess that's the kind of line that they'd go for. Wouldn't be the smart thing for the Tories to do, just trigger the election, lose and have Labour take the fallout of the cost of living crisis and have a crack in 5 years. I mean, but people will forget, like, the cost of living crisis will die out in, a year's time or whatever. Like, we're projected price rises October and then January, but there's no, it depends on, like, oil futures, I guess, but I can't see it levelling out further than that, considering that OPEC have started releasing more surplus back into the market, bringing prices down now. Like, price of oil by the barrel is going down and has gone down significantly and has continued to go down month on end because of OPEC policy. So you'd expect that over the course of those 5 years, there would be some way in which the Labour could resurrect the economy to then be able to win again. So I don't think it's as smart as it could be. Although I guess if they holding the general election in 2 years' time, which is what we're expecting, that might be close enough to the cost of living crisis that they probably would still lose. Like, they'd probably still have still live under the shadow of the Johnson administration, their failures, right? I think the bigger issue isn't actually Labour and the cost of living crisis. I think if there was a general election now, the big issue is Brexit. The big issue is the Northern Ireland Protocol. The big issue is Keir Starmer not having a proper plan, just giving us platitudes and essentially doing what Liz Truss was trying to do and trying to get a better deal on certain goods passing between Northern Ireland and Great Britain to try and ease kind of the economic barrier across the North Sea. So, and that is something that you can't save unless you either join the customs union, right? You keep the Northern Ireland Protocol, or you have war. You have war in Ireland. You have terrorist attacks happening because the Good Friday Agreement has been compromised. That's your choice, but he's already said that he's not going to go back into the customs union. So that's going to be the real sticking point, is you've got a Remainer in the form of Keir Starmer. He may have said that he's explicitly saying that Brexit, means completely clean, but Brexit with a customs union is still Brexit, but without all of the shit bits that cause fucking war in Ireland. So he's really shot himself in the foot by explicitly committing to no single market, no customs union, no EFTA agreement, right? So he's really, if there was a snap election and Labour did win, I think that would really be the sticking issue, more so than the cost of living crisis, especially if they're trying to then win an election in the 5 years succeeding the actual snap election. Because I think the cost of living crisis would be far in the rearview mirror, and people would be far more concerned with the ongoing crisis of what the fuck to do about Northern Ireland.
The man in the, I can't see what's on your shirt, is it? Foxes? Yeah. Right, okay.
Well, what is the point in replacing Boris Johnson when the people that are going to lead the Conservative Party are just as corrupt as he is? He's just got more of charisma than they would have. The only reason that I feel that he's been ousted is because he's shining a light upon the corruption in the Conservative Party as a whole.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I think came from you is who should be the next leader. So, I mean, OK, I'll let you do that in a moment. Let me just go around, and then when I come to you, you can put that in there. So in terms of who should be the next leader, Deanna, who's going to get your vote?
It's got to be someone with a proper vision that's going to carry this country forward, that's going to, frankly, make Great Britain a great place that the world really kind of relish and look up to.
I thought Johnson was going to do that.
Do you ever let anyone finish?
Also, that's just platitudes. I believe that they'll do more of the good things and less of the bad things. Oh, well, great. 10 out of 10, Dana. That's a really fucking substantive answer you've given us.
OK, carry on.
Nice.
On you go.
Who's going to have a proper vision, but is going to inspire this country to want to do better and to move forward. And for me, a person with that vision, with a good economic vision, but also with a track record of delivery in government, is Liz Truss. So if she stands, she'll be getting my support.
Oh, my God.
OK. So you're...
Truss? You got to be fucking joking. The darling of the Heritage Foundation. That's no fucking way. And she was a person, she did her own fucking TikTok. I reacted to it on stream. So about how much she stands for trans rights, and this Truss is like an ardent transphobe, right? Like, what the fuck is she, like, and I guess her vision as well is just fucking the objectivist future, turning Britain into the European Switch. like sweatshop country, like the sweatshop of Europe. Like, fuck that shit. How on earth can she say that she's a Liz Truss supporter, considering the kind of constituency that she represents as well? Because the Tories can't walk back on Brexit, having Labour do it for them and come back with the Eurosceptic. I mean, that makes sense to me, McQueen, for the Tories' sake.
We're applauding that, so let's hear from you.
I agree that Liz Truss should be the next Prime Minister.
And why do you think her?
Because there's big decisions to be made.
Pork markets!
At this moment in time, Boris Johnson is going to try and be a caretaker up until October. How can it take so long to re-elect a Prime Minister when we can have next week a 22 committee getting a vote of...
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
no confidence in just a week's time.
And what do you think of John Major's letter today, where he's effectively describing Boris Johnson as a kind of human wrecking ball in Westminster, and that he just can't be left there, and someone else needs to stand in as a caretaker? You think that should happen?
I think he's concentrated too much on the other issues rather than the main political party issues, which obviously what he was democratically elected for. And I think he has, to be fair, had a lot of those to put up with, rather than most prime ministers in the past. I'm not defending him in that respect, but he has had to put up with a lot.
Well, I should point out Liz Truss, of course, has not yet said she was saying. Just as you were applauding, there were a lot of groans. Who was groaning there? Who was that? You were, right, let's hear from you.
Well, as you say, the journalist there, sorry, I forgot your name.
This is Tim.
Tim, that things can only get better. How can things get better under a Tory government? The cost of living crisis, you've got children going to school who are hungry, asking teachers for food. You've got homelessness. People can't afford, to heat their homes. It's either eat or heat. The whole political system needs to change. We need to put people before profit. And that is all the Tories think about, is looking after the rich friends, and they don't do anything for working people.
OK, let's hear from...
True. Very true.
Man behind you in the stripy shirt.
Thank you. Slightly different point. I agree we should have a general election, but I don't think that's going to happen. Whatever happens, I just wish the government would start governing and stop just doing 24/7 campaigning and covering big dogs behind.
OK. And the man in the black shirt.
Why haven't we got a credible opposition? This is what the country needs. We need someone to put up against the Conservatives and put points across and get change. They're not credible at the moment. That's why the Conservatives can do what they want.
All right, Alison, you want to come back in?
True. Like, the woman at the start is saying we need to put people before profit. And Labour are still doing the same thing. Oh, we're the pro-business party. We won't even fucking publicly back, striking workers trying to get a better living for themselves. How can you call yourself a Labour Party when you won't even do the basics for a party that is ostensibly the union representation in fucking Westminster, right? That's nonsense. And he's also correct in saying they don't stand for anything. They're just sitting back and pretending that not being Boris Johnson is good enough to get elected.
Well, I will come back in that. First of all, I insist on dealing with the point about Iraq, because these guys, this is what they do. They throw out stuff. We've had 6 inquiries into Iraq, cleared by them all. The guy who started that whole thing was a guy called Andrew Gilligan, who was a colleague of Tim's at the Telegraph. And do you know
Hey, thank you for the follow. TTVS Wee Gamer.
Job is now he's transport advisor to Boris Johnson. They're all in it together. They're part of the same corrupt class. I'll come on to your question now, unless Bridget wants to answer it. I agree that I think Labour are not strong enough. I was expelled from the Labour Party for voting Lib Dem in protest at their Brexit stand, but I'm still absolutely 100% Labour to the core. But I want Labour to do better, and I think they can do better, but they must do better. Everywhere I go around this country, and long before Pinchergate, whatever we want to call it, for some time now, people have loathed this government. They feel a sense of disgust about what this government is doing to the country. But they're not yet looking across the aisle and thinking that's the alternative. And that is not the public's fault. That is the Labour Party has got to campaign harder, develop policy harder, understand that to win power in this country against entrenched Conservative interests is really, really hard. And I want them to do better, do harder, because I tell you, if these Tories get back another term, I honestly fear for the future of this country. I really do.
What's your response to that, Bridget?
I mean, I want us to do better.
Well, have you not seen TV's Dilemma? How, since Mick Lynch did all of his TV opportunities and he made every single fucking journalist in the UK like a complete fucking cart horse who can handle, basic questions and statement of fact, right? Robert Jenrick not even knowing the tickets on the train network is put up by the retail price index. Not probably they're so fucking incompetent, and now they've realised that he makes them look like idiots. I mean, I noticed Mick Lynch has very few actual abilities to go on, not very few appearances in the media nowadays. Do you think that's weird?
We'll continue to do better. I mean,
But why do you think you aren't? To answer Alice's point, why do you think you
I think
aren't?
taking a step back, thinking back to where we were in 2019 and the election and the result that we suffered then, we had such a big mountain to climb, and it was always going to take time. But I think the progress that we've been making, as shown in the local elections and the by-election in Wakefield, shows that we are making progress. But I completely acknowledge that we've got a lot more to do to win over the trust of people again, because it was such a big breach in 2019.
Well, just shut the fuck up about Corbyn. No, we don't care. Like, most people, I don't think really actually care about trying to distance yourself from 2019. They just want to know what you're going to fucking do. They want policies, they want vision, they want, you know, something that sets you apart from the Tories, which you don't have at the moment. Because all you're doing is saying we're not Boris Johnson because we're more statesman-like, we're fucking, you know, briefcase Labour. Give us a policy, give us plans to make the country better. Because at the moment, they've got fucking nothing, literally nothing.
Once you've lost people's trust and confidence, it takes time to build it back. But in terms of one area where we'd be taking action right now to make life better for families, to make change across our country, on climate change, a big challenge that we face both here and across the world, but also a real opportunity to provide well-paid, highly skilled jobs that provide for the next generation. Because we've seen terrible economic growth over the last 12 years in this country, and that means we've taken a real hit on living standards, that people's wages haven't kept up. There's a lot more that we will say come the general election, but I'm determined that we will set out that really positive vision about the change that we need to see, because I think Britain is currently stuck. We are stuck in this mire, and I think people are crying out for real change, for fresh leadership, and I think the contrast between the leadership that Keir Starmer has offered and is offering up against Boris Johnson and any of the
it's just contrast against Boris Johnson. Give us policy. Tell us what you're going to do.
The names that we'll hear about in the weeks ahead, I think the contrast is very, very stark. A credible, serious person who will put our country first. We're a brilliant country. I love our country. But I tell you, we haven't had a government that gives our country what it needs for a very long time.
Tim, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I'm certainly not part of any political class, if I have any class at all. And in fact, the only time...
Well, look, have you heard your fucking voice, mate? Yeah, pull the other one, mate. It's got bells on.
Time I've ever run for Parliament was for your party, was for the Labour Party, although you're not in it anymore, are you? I would point out that much of the distrust that's there in modern politics began with New Labour. It began with the culture of spin. It began with the sense that you couldn't trust what politicians were saying. And it also began...
I mean... Not wrong.
Done well. New Labour also launched the role of celebrity in our culture as well, rather than substance and principle and philosophy. And as regards to what can change, well, the gentleman said they're all corrupt, they're all tainted. There are people who will be running in this election campaign who have never worked for Boris Johnson, who are coming from outside of the cabinet. And although I suspect that I'll do him more harm than good,
Why they still fucking rubber-stamped every piece of legislation that his fucking piece-of-shit government tried to put through? They never defied the whip, took a stand, said this is wrong and I want no part of it. They were sitting there, biding their time, knowing that as soon as the shit hit the fan, they could then jump away from it by saying, oh no, I wasn't part of the... no, I wasn't part of the cabinet. Well, you still fucking voted for everything. You're still part of all the select committees that still helped, you push the same narratives that the government's trying to push. Yeah, fucking hell, like, have some self-respect. Yes, he is pro-Tory.
I personally would be supporting Tom Tugendhat for leader of the Conservative Party, precisely because he is a man who has served his country in the military. He comes from the outside, he's an expert in foreign affairs, and I think he would provide a completely new start when it comes to the Conservatives. I hope if he does do that, by the way, that one thing he does is go back to being a bit more conservative on economic policy, because all these issues around cost of living, there is a traditional Tory answer to that, and it's lower taxes and a smaller government.
I think this gentleman's calling out...
I look forward to Sweatshop UK. Let's go.
Labour is right to. Down the road from here, Wakefield, we had a by-election last month because there's a Tory MP, Imran Ahmad Khan, who was ousted as a paedophile. And the by-election, if you look at there was a polling done on why the soft voters voted for Labour. It was a Conservative seat, it went back to Labour. It was Labour, then back to Conservative, then back to Labour. And the reason, none of the reasons were for Labour. It was against the Conservatives. The Conservatives don't understand the working class. Boris Johnson doesn't respect the truth. And it was the first 20 reasons why they voted was against the Conservatives, not for Labour. And Labour have a real problem there. What does Keir Starmer really represent? He voted 48 times against Brexit, so whether he believes in democracy is kind of hard to sort of get behind, even though this week I know he said he's finally, 6 years later, going to get fully behind Brexit. He didn't support the strikers. I mean, if the leader of the Labour Party doesn't support the strikers, what does he represent? He dabbles in wokery. It's time he sets aside to get a Labour leader who really believes...
He's sounding so good up until the point where something's too woke.
Believes in Labour, true Labour values. Get a Lisa Nandy or an Andy Burnham, someone to come in and take over Labour.
We're going to continue this conversation. Yes.
Alison, respectfully...
It's such a nonsense term. It just means literally any amount of being socially progressive. Like for some people it means any amount of being socially progressive, and for some people it means like woke scold screaming on the Bird app. It's such a fucking nonsense term which has the meaning has been so diluted. Again, it's newspeak. Like you can't think about things in nuanced terms. It's just, is it in the woke box or is it in the anti-woke box? And means that people from these different kind of spheres of politics then can create like an in-group and an out-group to hate and to coalesce around, rather than actually think about it issue by issue on an intersectional basis.
There are so many things to call out Boris Johnson on. So many things.
Slayer 420 TV, thank you very much for the raid read. It's much appreciated.
And to call out him on his lying, and you said he was lying and lying and lying. And I was just a boy, a teenager in 2003. But the politics I was brought up with was your politics, of New Labour politics. And I remember the dodgy dossier. And sorry, the idea to call out Boris Johnson on lying is the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, I know you can say it. Look, I have some respect for you, certainly more than Tim. But let me just deal with the substance of it. What would you do than have literally 6 inquiries, including 2 very rigorous public inquiries, all of which showed and established that there were no lies? There was a policy decision made which a lot of people disagreed with. They still disagreed with it, but there was no conspiracy, there was no lie. There was a policy decision that the Prime Minister had to take. So I
What was fucking illegal? Like, what didn't even meet the UN standards? Come on.
do respect you. I think the point about spin is nonsense. I think that the Labour government delivered an awful lot for this country. I think one of the reasons I get so angry about Brexit is because I think one of the greatest things we did, the Good Friday Agreement, is being undermined and potentially destroyed by what they're doing.
I wonder who might have been instrumental in making sure that we got a Good Friday Agreement.
I think that Tony Blair, Gordon Brown were the substantial figures who really were in politics because of what they believed. I'd say the same about Thatcher. I'd say the same about Major. My calling out of Boris Johnson is to do with the fact he's a populist, he's a polariser, he's our first...
I said this on the stream yesterday, but I fucking hate the term populist because it's used by centrists like Alistair here to try and equivocate between left-wing populism and right-wing populism. And there's a word for right-wing populism. It's called fascism, right? It's the ideal of the strongman, the ideal of the will of the people overturning democracy to be in their own kind of, as I guess, not really with regards to that fact. And I think that's probably thank you for the follow, Kieran Saunders. Welcome to No Justice stream. I guess it's less about kind of in the will of the people type thing, but the strongman, the culture war, that kind of stuff. Like, that's what right populism is. Left populism is socialism. It's economic populism. It's populism to be able to, make the lives of the working man better. That's not, and they're just trying to equivocate between right populism and left populism. It's the worst fucking liberal centrist bumwash that they do to try and make Jeremy Corbyn look the same as Boris Johnson. I hate it.
First post-truth Prime Minister. He is Trumpian in virtually everything he does, including staying in Downing Street beyond his welcome. So I take your point, but I respectfully say I think you're wrong. I think Boris Johnson is the worst Prime Minister and the biggest liar we've ever had in public office.
OK, I'll come back to it, but just wait 1 second. The things we've been touching here in terms of Labour and Brexit, we are going to come on to. But before we do, I just want to tell you, next week, the programme will be coming from Torquay.